I bought over $300 worth of earplugs and tested them extensively to find the absolute best earplug for motorcycle riding, and here are the results. Now I judge these earplugs off of three main categories. One is comfort, both in-ear and installation, but mostly about the in-ear, how does it feel in the helmet. Secondly is going to be the noise reduction, the total decibel reduction. Now, I don't want it to reduce everything, but I'm looking for it to reduce exhaust noise and wind noise, essentially the things that will destroy your hearing on a motorcycle. And the third being balance. Now, a lot of these earplugs brag about being able to block out wind noise and the things that'll damage your hearing, but still let in people talking, music from your cardo, and other important things. So we're really going to be focusing on the balance, the comfort, and the wind noise, or just the general motorcycle-specific noise reduction. Now, unfortunately, we immediately have to disqualify a few due to just their fitment issues, whether there's something like this that just stick out and have cables and are too long, to something like the decibels that a lot of people recommended, but there's a ton of hard plastic that goes on the outside of the ear, and I just found that it really doesn't fit well. It causes a decent amount of pain depending on the person, depending on the helmet, so I just can't recommend something that isn't going to work well. That also cuts out these for having cables, and it cuts out the wax ones because you don't wear wax earplugs. The next category is the ones that work, but I wouldn't use, and that starts out with the eargasms. Simply put, they just don't reduce enough noise, at least not for motorcycle specific. It could be a good earplug, just not for motorcyclists. Next up here is the Pinlock earplugs. They're pretty comfortable, they fit well, they feel like silicone earplugs, you don't notice them too much, but they simply try to balance out the good noises and bad noises and fails to do it correctly. It lets in a ton of bass. It seems to block out a lot of high frequency, some of the mid frequency, but it's actually the droning from the exhaust that cuts right through. It nearly sounds worse in these than it does without any earplugs, simply because it's blocking out the other noises. So all you hear is the exhaust drone. Now, in the same vein as the Pinlocks, the no noises here have kind of a similar issue with balance, where they just don't balance correctly. The wind noise is fine. It's somewhere in the middle. You can still hear the wind noise, but it actually just sounds very, very tinny. So when you're speaking to people or walking around or just trying to hear your environment, it sounds very, very unnatural, which is kind of a problem for me. And the Pinlock and this one also are the only ones on this list that have that same buffeting issue, that when you're moving around and you hit a pothole and your helmet moves, you just hear these like it just seals and unseals in your ears, and it's really, really disorienting, and it's really annoying. So with that, these ones are out. Now we're finally to the middle category, which is all the foamies. They seem to kind of land in the middle because they have absolutely zero balance. They cut out absolutely everything. So they score next to nothing on the balance rating because they just try to stop anything from coming through. But with that, they do have a very high decibel reduction rating. So if you want the absolute quietest, some of the foamies here are going to be the ones to get. The foamies are more comfortable than some, but not quite as comfortable as first place. If it was me, I wouldn't do the Howard Lights in the bags here. They're very comfortable, but they don't have enough decibel reduction. And I also wouldn't do the Milwaukees. They reduce a ton of decibels. These are definitely the quietest out of anything, but they're a little painful because they're so firm that you definitely feel them. So if you're gonna do foamies, I actually like these HDX earplugs. They seem like they have a ton of decibel reduction, pretty comfortable, not too noticeable, again, but no balance. But if you're gonna do foamies, technically, out of all the foamies I tried, even the ones not here, these were the best. Now we are left with three options here, and any three of these I'd say are a pretty solid earplug. All of these are great. If you have the loops, the earpieces, or the Alpines, you've got a pretty good earplug. But in third from the top is the Loop earplugs. And these are the Loop Experience Pluses. Now in short, if you just wanted a replacement for foamies that weren't a one-time use, these are pretty solid. But with that, it's because they don't have very much balance that I think they're so similar to foamies. They've got pretty good decibel reduction, decent comfort, but again, really not much balance here. Some people don't like the way they fit because they've got this big ring on the inside, but overall they're easy to install, easy to take out, and they work pretty well. Now with only two earplugs left, the number one earplug that I tested absolutely by a long shot was the Alpine MotoSafe Races. These things are incredible. I am genuinely in shock with how good they are. There's a few things. First off, when you put them in, you don't think you really have earplugs in. They don't muffle your voice very much. You know when you put earplugs in or anything and you can suddenly hear a very bassy version of your voice, it doesn't do that very much, which makes you go, oh, these aren't gonna work all that well. And you can hear people talking really well, even with a helmet on. But the second you start riding, I was just like, oh, these might be fantastic. Like these might be really, really good if we get on the highway and go. Even for average highway riding, it was incredible at how little wind there was. They're actually so good at blocking out the wind that I kept taking them out and getting back on the highway to make sure that there was wind noise. And as for the motorcycle or the exhaust noise, again, it was incredibly well balanced. So it's just a perfect balance of the exhaust. It takes out almost all the wind noise and lets you hear everything around you. And in terms of comfort, these are also the most comfortable earplugs that I wore. It was the only earplug that when I tested, it just disappeared. Whether that's on the bike, with the helmet on, off the bike, you forget that you're wearing earplugs. They're just that good. Now, I didn't want to include sizing into the 3 factors, but for most of the other earplugs that had options for small, medium, large end pieces, Tyler and I would switch back and forth. He'd use the big ones, I'd use the medium ones, and that's what worked for us. These earplugs don't come with separate sizes, and it's the only earplug outside of the foamies that fit both of us perfectly, which is great. Now, I've got a little surprise for you guys, but before I get to it, I want to talk about the Earpiece Moto Pros and why they're second place. Simply put, they were just second to the Alpines in nearly every category. The only big note I have for them is they're oval shaped, which they say is kind of like an anatomical oval shaped thing. That's very cool, except that it means you can install them wrong because you need that oval to be oriented just perfectly. Both Tyler and I noticed, he put them in one time, we got on a ride and we had to pull over because he noticed this one was just not installed correctly, so we had to take his helmet off and fix it. And I did the same thing. We were walking to the bikes and I was like, I think one's just not in. And he had to look and he saw it was twisted and I was like, okay, and I fixed it. So just the oval shape made the installation a little bit more difficult. So it's a really good earplug. I do like it. It just simply is overshadowed by the Alpine. It's an incredible earplug. Now, after I'd finished the testing and found that the Alpine MotoSafe races were at the absolute top for the entire test, I reached out to Alpine to tell them, hey, I'm about to do some videos where you guys are going to come out as #1 for the earplug. If you want to be a part of it, let me know. The videos are coming out either way. And they said, yeah, absolutely, we want to be a part of it. And so I worked with them and we've gotten a 20% discount code for you guys. Using code JACOB20 gets you 20% off the Alpine MotoSafe races. I have a link you can click and I think it auto applies it, or you can just punch the code in at the end at checkout. Now, the code is only good for a week. It's good until November 9th. So they opened it up a little early for me, which I appreciate, but it's only good till November 9th. So you've got 1 week to use it. That's the deal. I hope you guys appreciate the code, but let's get to a little bit of data on all of this if you want some visual screenshots about all the earplugs. Now, in terms of comfort, you'll find that the Eargasms, the Milwaukees, and the Loops are pretty much towards the bottom, just due to the fitment issues I talked about, but the Alpines are just at the top. They are just the most comfortable, as I mentioned. In terms of noise reduction, the Eargasms, the Pinlocks, and the No Noises just simply are not enough noise reduction for me to feel safe wearing, and the Alpines are really up there competing well with the foamies. Now, in terms of balance, you got a lot of people in the middle, but then you have the foamies at the very bottom with 0 balance and the Alpines at the absolute top. Now, here's the 3 categories overlaid on top of each other, and you can see how the Alpines are just really consistently hitting the marks. And now if we combine those 3 categories, you get an average score, and these are the results here. This is what I was basing the order off of. Now, why didn't I include cost in this? Well, because I wanted to find the absolute best earplug, and the cheapest at a box of foamies is about 20 bucks, and the most expensive was the Loops and earpieces at about 45. So I just didn't want that to be a part of the test. I wanted to find you the absolute best, full stop, not considering the price. Now, funny enough, the #1 spot, the Alpine MotoSafe races, come out to like $14 and change with my code, or $18 I think on their website, whereas the #2 spot is about 45 bucks and the #3 spot is 45 bucks. So you could argue that the Alpines are also the best value, but that simply just wasn't what we were ranking. It just turned out that way. To get to this point, to make this video, took weeks. It took hundreds of miles of riding. It took my friend Tyler's help of testing out all these earplugs, and it took us going out again and again and again to keep repeating the test to make sure that what we think is true. So if you appreciate this, leave a comment, leave a like, follow, do what you'd like, engage with this post, share it with your friends who refuse to wear earplugs and you think you can convince them. Remember to use code JACOB20 to get 20% off of your Alpine MotoSafe races. Thank you for supporting me for making all these crazy videos.